Is that sometimes a challenge when you work in football, the fast-paced environment, very hands-on, 24 hours, constantly bombarded with jobs and tasks? Do you feel that sometimes that's missed based on that developmental knowledge and that theory perspective, where sometimes it's nice to just take a breather and start to reflect and develop a sense of gratitude and opportunity to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the pace of it, especially when you're working at first team level, where I've been in the championship the last last 9 years, where you got Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then obviously the roles I've had where I'm dealing with all the youth players as well. Sometimes to brush up on your own learning or the stuff that you've already learned. So it's also important to remember what you've learned and try to put it into place, rather than actually working on the hop where you're just reacting to what's happened, rather than using the knowledge that you acquired.
And how did football become a passion for you at an early stage? So if I bring you back to your early years, can you talk to me about how that was very influential based on your career so far?
Football, I mean, really, I started when I was 5. My dad bought me a ball. I still remember it was a green ball, and then I had the ball in the playground, so you were popular for that time. And then I used to go to the park with my brothers and play at Finsbury Park. So I've always been into it since that time.
Where did you grow up, Chris?
I grew up in North London. I know everyone thinks I'm from Bristol, but I'm not. I was actually born in Birmingham, but I grew up in North London. I grew up first of all in Finsbury Park, and then I moved to Holloway, right near where the ground is now. So that's been really my background. My schooling and everything was in that area.
Well, why Bristol? Why is that just a mistake on Wikipedia? Is it, or?
I'd throw a change it, but maybe someone just thought as being an apprentice at Bristol, they must have thought I was born there or whatever. But no, born in Birmingham, and then we moved quite swiftly to London, and I grew up in North London.
And you mentioned that transition to Bristol in terms of kind of youth football and academy football. Can you reflect on that in terms of that moment for you getting the opportunity to potentially make it as a kind of a youth team scholar and opportunity to play? Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about why the job that I did, why that helped me, was because I started off at Arsenal as a it's the first professional club we went to. But in those days, you weren't. There was no under 9s and under 10s. You was there at 14, 15. And I got released from there, and I went to Charlton, got released from there. And I was actually going back to school, to sixth form. And fortunately, I went for a trial at Bristol City, and they offered me an apprenticeship, an old school apprenticeship. So, which was a very, very difficult job in those days, because you actually did more work than you did football. Painting the ground, helping the groundsman, washing the kit. You did more of that than you actually did football.
What are your thoughts on that today? Because a lot of people mention that that period and kind of past periods where there was a sense of discipline and a sense of locking up and respecting older senior players or senior members. Some people argue that's kind of missing within the game today. What are your thoughts on that as a whole?
I think to a point, it is missing to a point. But then again, I just think that football clubs just reflect what's happening in society. So I don't know how old you are, but if you look at, I was born in the 60s, so corporal punishment was normal. And then I went to school in the 70s as well, where the teacher could actually throw the blackboard rubber at you and stuff like that. We got the cane, and you got kicked out of the class and facing the wall and all that sort of stuff. So, lots of things have changed, and I just think it's just a reflection of how society is. And one of the reasons I was having a chat with someone the other day, an ex-player of my generation, and we're talking about how my generation has actually started off people being in the way they are now, because we went through a very hard time. Our parents came from post-war environment. My parents were part of the Windrush generation, so we're coming from a very hard environment. So discipline and not having anything was normal. So my generation decided that we don't want our children to go through that. So we made things easier for them, and stepped off the discipline. And then now they're having kids. So what's normal to them, they probably think that we're quite harsh. They're thinking we're harsh. So I don't think it'll ever change. But I do wish at times there was a little bit, not corporal punishment, but there was a little bit more responsibility for the players to realise that there is a big world outside football. If you don't make it, you go to the reality of working in a shop or digging roads or whatever it might be.
Bristol and then Brighton. Transition away from obviously that North London area that you mentioned. How did you cope with, moving away from home and trying to get experience as well as playing professional football?
To be honest with you, moving to Bristol was quite a big experience because I'm very, very much a mummy's boy, but very, very much not a daddy's boy. And I had quite a volatile relationship with my dad. I was probably going to have to leave the house anyway at 16. But I was going to be, but my mum, I was very, very much very close to my mum. So, I've got a big family. So I've got 5 sisters and 2 brothers. So leaving them was odd, but it was an adventure. It was a massive adventure. And if you want to be a footballer, a lot of the times people try to stay in the area that they were born to be a footballer, but you can't always go to the team you support. I'm an Arsenal supporter. So, leaving there or not making it there or not being offered a scholarship there was heartbreaking. However, I wanted to be a footballer. I was prepared to go anywhere to be a footballer, and going to Bristol, believe it or not, in those days were in the First Division, which is the Premiership now. They were in the old First Division, and there were some really, really outstanding players there, like Norman Hunter, Terry Cooper, Chris Garland, Joe Royal. Loads of these people have gone on to be managers, but they were people that I would have picture cards of. I'd have the little cards of these people, because when you're 16 and they're coming towards the end of their career, you've actually seen them play. Well, you haven't seen them play because we didn't see them play in the same way as we can see them now. But you would see them on Match of the Day and stuff like that. So when you're walking in at 16, these people are like gods to you, like they're not real, So going there was very difficult. Bristol was very, very difficult. It was a good adventure, but it was very, very difficult because of the fact that you're away from home. You can't. It's not like now where you can just FaceTime your mum. You had to go to the phone box. You had to have a handful of 2 pences, which only lasts 2 or 3 minutes. And if you've made a phone call and that person wasn't in, then you've done the 2 pence or your 10 pence, and then you're walking back home. So it could be a very lonely place in those days. I was living in a hostel. So all the players that were from around the country all lived in a big house. And we had a lady called Nan that everybody loved. Cooking was great, and a lot of hijinks. But on the other hand, it wouldn't be something that I would recommend for a club, because I think there's a lot of bullying goes on in hostels, because you can't get away from the bad training session, can you? You can't get away from the banter. But I can't say I didn't. It wasn't a valuable experience, because it was.
Is hostile the right word in terms of using that as an experience for you at Bristol? Because you mentioned a difficult, challenging time. Am I right in saying that?
No, it was difficult, challenging time. Yeah, but I was only 16. and literally leaving home. In the old days, see, like now, you have to do it. You can do education. There's a lot of more player care. You're literally leaving home to get a job, and if you don't get that job, you're not coming back to higher education, college, and this diploma and that diploma. You're coming back to work in any job you can get. Now, just before I left school, I worked in a greengrocer's in Seven Sisters Road. I worked there, and to be honest with you, that was a valuable experience, but it was an experience that made me realise I didn't want to be one. So you come back from Bristol, what job are you going to do? I only had one GCSE. That's all I had. So I wasn't a highly educated person in those days. So one of the things that helped me going to Brighton was I always remember this game. I had a youth team match against Middlesbrough in the youth, and I had the best game of my life. And the England under-20s manager happened to be there, John Cartwright, who's a legend in the game, and he picked me for the squad. So when I got released, I was able to put that on my letter that you had to write in those days. You had to write a letter, and then you would have to be lucky that someone influential picked it up. And Gary Stevens was there at the time, and they asked him, what I was like, and he said, no, he was in the squad, whatever. And Kane Craggs, who, went on to tell me years later that they'd thrown all the letters away, and he just happened to pick mine out of the bin. So gave it to Adam Mullery. Adam Mullery invited me in, and then they signed me. Went on trial and they signed me.
FA Cup finalists in '83, was it?
Yeah, FA Cup final. We talk about people being released. Believe it or not, I got released in May, June from Bristol City, and I was in the first team squad at Brighton in November. Well, I didn't make my debut till the end of that season, and then I had, if anyone ever looks over my career, I only played maybe 200 games because over a 16-year career, because I have 15 operations. So I had a year out then for injury and bad form, and then I got back in the team, and we got to the FA Cup final, which was has to be a highlight really, because in days gone by the FA Cup was massive. It was like everyone would watch it. It was like when England reached the final stages of a cup, it was like that. It was the streets were empty. Everybody would watch it. It was on both. We only had 3 channels. It was on both sides. So it was the thing that kids dreamt about, scoring in the FA Cup. I know that's gone slightly different now because things have evolved, but in those days it was probably one of the biggest things you could do as a footballer.
A lot of people are mentioning this season's FA Cup, that magic is slowly coming back into that trophy based on the opportunities clubs now have to win a major trophy. And even in different sense, Newcastle winning the Carabao, obviously in this case, with the FA Cup, there's obviously Man City are left there, but a great opportunity for football clubs today. Do you kind of relate that a little bit to the modern era, would you say?
Yeah, and what I do, I would probably pat Mourinho and Pep on the back for that, because they're about winning trophies. They're not about that. That's what they are. They like to collect trophies. And I think for Pep, if whatever trophy he would go in, I think he'd play his strongest team and he'd want to win it. And I think that's helped to bring that sparkle back into it. I mean, the Carabao Cup hasn't had this level of interest and shine since probably the late 70s. It was always a massive day out. That the League Cup was a massive day out, and then the FA Cup was even bigger. So those 2 cups, I think, have had the shines come back to them, and I'm really glad for that, because there's still a lot of fairy tailing in the winning and losing of the smaller teams, and the interest. You've got Preston going all the way to the quarter final. That's something to behold. For the managers, and they're playing against big teams. But playing against big teams when there's actually a realistic chance of them going through. In the past, what would happen is like going away talking about the Magic's come back. There was a period where the small teams just got smashed. It was just got smashed, even with the weaker teams. Now that sort of thing where you do have smaller teams going to the latter stages, and it is a fairy tale, has come back.
Who did Brighton play in that '83 final?
Man United.
Right.
We won't go any further. But Man United. It was the best day, one of the best days of Brighton, of Brighton's history back in those days. Brighton are now obviously doing fantastic. as well, but it was one of the biggest days in their history at that time. And we drew 2-2 in the first game. And in those days, you had replays. So you'd play on a Saturday, and then if it was a draw, you'd have extra time. And then if it was a draw, there was no penalties. You went to a replay on the Thursday.
I think it's crazy how there was replays. When you think of that now. Obviously, I'm 32, so I've never really experienced those replays. That's never been in my lifetime. But it's just mad how that was such a thing now, and now people are trying to scrap extra time. For example, it's mad how it's kind of flipped as a whole.
Well, there was replays in every round. So if you see every round, there was a replay. And sometimes I remember one of the League Cups where they went to two replays, 3 matches. So, and people talk about playing a lot of games. The old Premier League was 42 games. You'd play 42 games. And then you'd play you played it in the League Cup and the FA Cup, and you could go to 2 or 3 replays in that.
Have you ever watched Gaelic football, Chris? Yeah. You ever watched that sport, the Irish sport?
Yeah, I have, because there's a guy called Kieran Dealey who was at sports scientist to QPR. He was a manager of a Gaelic team.
Yeah, they do something similar based on what you've just said about the 83 Cup final, and the fans complain. Well, it's a little bit of a kind of a bickering from the fans, but they say it's the biggest cash cow for the organisation to have another replay based on the amateur values of GAA. But obviously it's different in professional football today because of the commercial aspect and the finances, hence probably why it's been watered out a bit.
Yeah, and I can see it. And you've got the Champions League. Is Champions League wasn't the same. Champions League was a straight knockout. Okay. So, now teams have got them extra 10 games a season. So
how did you become a coach then? How did that transition happen for you?
I became a coach more from desperation than actual wanting to be a coach. I mean, I was very rebellious player. I had a few couple of bad years. I look back now and I think, wow, if you'd have had what they've got now, things may have been different. But my mum died and I went off the rails. And right. I had 2 or 3 years of, I probably look back now, probably being an alcoholic. So I was quite rebellious. So my career was up and down, and lots of injuries and stuff like that. Anyway, I ended up leaving Southend after, and then had a back operation, and then I got myself back and I went to Malta. A friend of mine, Don Shanks, he knew somebody there, and the fella who he knew was on the board at Man United at the time, because Man United got the biggest supporters club is in Malta. Anyway, he remembered me anyway. So I then had a training session with a club called Nashar. They asked me to sign, and then the manager got the sack. And then I was a foreigner getting more money. They just said, right, so you got to take training. So I didn't know what I was doing, I've got to admit. Anyway, we just kept winning. So I became the player manager, and then we got promoted, got to the cup final, and then I've been a coach ever since.
Yeah, you mentioned that element of alcohol and the culture of football and dealing with trauma. Do you feel that's still around in a different sense within the game today? Because there's a lot of people talk about drinking culture, but there's different ways now where players are trying to cope with the pressures. And obviously, you mentioned the situation with your mum. I'm just interested on your thought processes are around supporting that element, because you mentioned your injuries as well. I presume that didn't help in terms of having time to overthink things and not knowing where to go. Just interested on your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the 80s was a drinking culture. So when you read books of old players played in the 80s, there was a massive drinking culture. So it was easy to mask depression and feeling low and being in pain and that sort of thing, emotionally and physically. It was easy to mask it with the drinking culture because it was normal. I reflect on it now and I look back now and I think, people talk about alcoholism or addictions and stuff like that. And there was definitely a period of time where it was probably fell into that category, and not understanding the detriment to my body that it had, and not understanding that wasn't the way out. And players now have got much more understanding of nutrition, much more understanding of sleep, much more understanding of how to help their injuries. They're literally little institutions themselves. They have their own physios, own nutritionists and stuff like that. But I think the pressures are slightly different. But all in all, it's still pressure. In my days, the pressure was that you probably weren't going to get another contract, or you'd get a free transfer. That sort of thing. Whereas now, I think that there's a lot of social media pressure. There's a lot of I would have to say, and this is going to sound really weird, but there's a lot of boredom. Sometimes when you have too much money and you actually don't know the difference of not having any money, because if you're 19 and you're getting 10 grand a week, or you're getting 2 grand a week, you've always had that, and then you have those means all the way through your life. It's what is the next fix? What's the next thing that I can get? You don't appreciating stuff doesn't come easy, because you buy a Porsche, then you buy a Ferrari, then you buy a Lamborghini, and sometimes that creates apathy because it comes too easy. Whereas on the other hand, we were more desperate, because first and foremost, my first professional wage was £80, but my first apprentice wage was £16. So you weren't earning that much more than the average man. You weren't, you might have been earning 2 weeks what an average man was earning. Whereas now people are earning a lifetime's money a month, So that striving takes special people, takes a different type of skill to have everything and still get up in the morning and actually train in a way that actually that gets you to a level where you're in a team and you can maintain your career.
Do you think that transition to Malta helped you in terms of a change of environment, a change of opportunity, and meeting new people and being in a little bit more out your comfort zone to try new things and find out a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, Malta definitely helped me, because sometimes that people say necessity is the father of invention. So necessity for me was me reinventing myself to a point where I had nobody around me. A lot of the times we think our friends help us, but a lot of times they don't. What they do is you go with the crowd. We try and tell that to the young players. You can be one in the crowd, but don't be in the crowd. Make sure that that where your levels are. So Malta really helped me, because it put me back on, not back. It actually got me to do education, because after a little while, there's only a certain amount of time you can go to the beach. There's only a certain amount of times you can sit in the sun. Only a certain amount of nightclubs you can go to when you don't know people. It's only a certain amount. Unfortunately for me, my girlfriend at the time, she was an aerobics instructor and a fitness coach, and we started learning about physiology and anatomy and all that sort of stuff. And I ended up doing a diploma in physiology and anatomy when I was out there. And I also started studying to be a PT, because a lot of the stuff out there is English in Malta. So I started learning about being a PT. And then my friend, who was the physio in the gym that my boss owned, he started helping me learn about end-stage rehab and all that sort of stuff, how to use the machines, all that. So I got really infused in learning, so we talk about being out of my comfort zone. But actually, I always believe that whatever you try to learn, it's actually in your comfort zone. You just have to make that comfort zone bigger. So a lot of the stuff I wouldn't have taken it like a duck to water had I not had some sort of enthusiasm for it or some interest in it to actually go and learn it. So I started doing personal training. I'm a masseur and aromatherapy. and pedicure and manicure. I started doing all that in the gym because I started learning it because I became my own business. And then, and then you get to the point where you start coming toward the end of your career where you're sprinting for that ball. And then it's like you're running backwards. People are just running past you. And I came to a point where I decided, I actually remember one of the times I just thought standing at a corner and getting elbowed in the head and thinking, I used to be able to jump for that, so, I just decided that I was going to go back to uni, and a friend of mine was doing a BEd at London Met, and he was talking about it. And so what I did in the afternoons in Malta, they have siestas. So for a year, 18 months, I hired tutors to do English and maths every afternoon. So I did that and then came back and did the exams and got into uni. And that's what I did, yeah.
I think there's a saying going around, leave the football before the football leaves you. Is that a little bit like you in that process in Malta?
Exactly.
How does one become a focused coach then? So you mentioned all these different skills and knowledge and attributes. How do you funnel that into mastering coaching then? How did that become something that you're passionate about?
Well, one of the things is, right, because I'm quite a fitness person. I've got a lot of fitness awards, degrees, that sort of stuff in it. So I really always was interested in that because I had a lot of injuries as well. So I started, when you're on your own, you have time to actually focus on things that might help you in your future. And being focused, for me, you have a couple of aha moments. So when I went to uni, I went there as a teacher to do teaching. So I did a BEd, and my specialist was health, physical education and recreation. So that covered human biology, sports science, biomechanics, all those sorts of things. I was really interested in that. And but the teaching theory, what I had with Wazowski and Bandoras and Liz Waterland and Bruners and all those sorts of things really, really interested with me. And I saw how that could help me with my coaching. So that focused, I was almost living my degree when I was going coaching, because I was looking at different teaching theories and how they work. Now, they're not all brilliant, but it made me understand a little bit more about how people learn and how the environment can help them, how you can help them, how you can connect with that person. And you don't have to be the most knowledgeable about the subject. You just need to be able to, whatever you know, if that person can know it or not know it or access it, makes you a better teacher than someone who's got lots of knowledge. So that was interesting. And then working in primary school, so I'm a primary school teacher by trade to start with, where you're doing the key stage 1s and 2s and you're working with the infants. You talk about your communication. How's your communication? Dealing with their finger painting and twinkle, twinkle, little star and stuff like that. And then you go to the next key stages where you're looking at, evaporation theory and, all those sorts of things. And a lot of it, I was thinking to myself, I had to learn it because I wasn't very good at school. So I had to actually learn it to teach them. So, it was challenging.
If I get you to take those experiences, and if we fast forward a little bit, and there's probably bits in there that we might have kind of missed. The FA and working for the English FA, based on those things that you mentioned in terms of, your playing experiences, your lived experiences, professional knowledge, craft knowledge, educating yourself, how's that then applied within a particular role within the FA that enables you to advance coaching experiences, coaching knowledge, and the development of the English game? I'm just interested on that process.
Well, go back to Malta. What used to happen in those days, there was a place called Tahali, but you could just go there, and a lot of Italian clubs used to come there to do warm weather training. So I used to sneak and have a little look at what they were doing, and so then fast that forward, then you look at football in the community, which is helped my communication. I coached a women's team for 3 years back in the day when a lot of people weren't, doing it. And I was at Orient, And all those experiences smashed together in a small space of time gave me quite an advantage regarding dealing with different communications, education. And round about then, things were becoming a little bit more focused from a sports science point of view and stuff like that. So me going there, they brought me in really to help with that, as well as the coaching point of view. So the FA for me was such a massive learning curve, and massive, the steepest, because I was Howard Wilkinson's assistant for the first year with the under-18s. Now, Howard, you know, as everybody knows, he's quite a stern man, but believe it or not, he's very, very knowledgeable. And behind that exterior, he's a very funny man. So, but I learned a lot from him, and a lot about coaching while I was there, from people like Dick Bates, Craig Simmons, who was a developer. You know, those two are massive mentors of mine. And at that time, we had a lot of good people there. You know, Martin Hunt, Kenny Swain, Steve Rutters, Jeff Pike, John McDermott, who's there now as the thing. John Allpress, who got me into it. You know, Paul Holder. You know, so I learned a lot from these people. When I first walked in, with a swag, and then I quickly realised that, you know what, if you keep doing that, you're gonna miss the boat. You're not gonna learn. You're not gonna learn what there is to learn from these people. So you know, that was interesting. And when I was there, I was a physio. I passed my physio, because in the old days you did a 3-year course, but it was distance learning. It's not like now where you got to be chartered. So I became a physio when I was there as well. So when I went back to Orient, I was a physio there as well. So for a period, you know, so it was you know, when you start getting that learning, that thing where you start learning, and then you just want to eat it. You just want to keep learning the next thing. You want to, you know, you want to make sure that people. One of the things I always thought about being a manager, I never wanted people to pull the wool over my eyes. I never wanted to be in a position where people are coming in with these tablets or these running drills or this. I always wanted to be in a position where I've got some knowledge, you know, not to be the expert, but just know who's not the expert, you know.
You mentioned learning as a key asset to you, and you mentioned Howard Wilkinson and other coaches. Was there ever a period where you challenged some of the perspectives they said based on your knowledge and learning?
Yeah. Well, they really challenged Howard too often. But yeah, I did too when I first went there. But I was sometimes challenging it from the wrong perspective. Because sometimes I think when you've got a bit of swag, you challenge it from the one perspective. You only think there's only one way of doing something. You think it's like now, if you look at the way people try and play, they all try and play like Man City, don't they? So, you know, I would challenge that. I would challenge something like that. That's not saying that was what they're doing is wrong, but I would say, well, hold on a minute, what's the alternative? And listen, don't get me wrong. If there's justification, I would accept it. But I'd want to know why people do things and stuff like that. And the fact that, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've done educationally had been probably quite left field for a lot of people. It's because I try to complement as many things as I can to basically open my mind to make sure that I'm doing what's best for the clients, which is the parents and the players.
What do you think that they've done significantly well, maybe during that period where you were there, Chris, to how it's going now in terms of the development of players? Is there anything that you think was really influential in terms of implementing certain philosophies or tactics or training or coaching or education, whatever it is that you think has really helped the development of the game in England today?
Well, I think Howard had a massive part to play. So when he was there, he instigated St George's. He instigated that because that was a piece of land that was earmarked years ago, and it sat there for years. And there was lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. So Howard was massive. Howard was one that would say, you know, we used to go to Lillishore to do our badges, which was like all DOMs. And he was the one who said, listen, in the years to come, the money that the players are making, they won't stay there. They'll go to a hotel and drive back. So he instigated a lot of that, and he instigated the academies coming in, etc. So a lot of the stuff that has been implemented came from that regime back in when I worked there, 1998 to 2000, 2001. So a lot of the stuff came from back there, and it obviously has been evolved from there. And I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the clubs. That's good. A lot of stuff that goes on in the clubs. People looking at more individual development than they did in the past. I think sometimes there's too much information, because the information always goes back to certain things. People talk about styles of play and this and that and the other, and everyone thinks that all the styles of play that happen now are new, but they're not. They're not. If you're a real historian of the game, or you're a real student of the game, you'll find that the principles of the games don't change. Yes, things evolve. Yes, things change because you have rule changes, you have this and that and the other. But fundamentally, the game itself is similar to how it's always been.
What are your thoughts on the game today in terms of, you mentioned Man City and the tiki-taka football, and you can line up with Barcelona and Pep Guardiola, but I feel like there's a little bit of a difference, more direct play creeping back in. But where do you see that going maybe in the modern era?
Listen, I watched the game last night, Forest versus Man United. The last 15 games could have been a League Two match. To get here, just Guire up front, Diags heading it down, this and that and the other. And people don't realise why that came into play. People have got no history of why that came into play in the first place, and what are the attributes needed for that game, and why is the English game so exciting? It's probably because of the direct play. Even though there is tiki-taka, but it's probably still much more direct than you go to the Spanish league. So the British public want to see end-to-end football. They want to see it, whereas other people might have more connoisseur of tactics and moves and whatever. I think the game for young coaches has gone too tactical. I don't think that a lot of young coaches coach. I think they coach sessions rather than players.
Yeah.
And I think you can do both. But people think knowing tactics makes you a good coach. It does not make you a good coach, because anyone can know tactics.
I was going to say, it's really interesting how you say that. I was speaking to a head of coaching from a Cat 1 academy. He said the exact same thing, based on the soft skills within football coaching seem to be missing through the generation coming through. And you mentioned the element of technical and tactical abilities and knowing how to play a certain system, etc. But those soft skills in terms of leadership and management seem to be watered down and not seen as valuable in comparison to before.
Well, I do some stuff for the AYA, the Youth Award, and based on individual coaching, developing the individual. Now, what I say on the talk, I was saying in 2005 when I came from America, when John McDermott brought me here. I've made it modern, obviously, to fit in with the times, but the principles of what I talk about are no different. Every time I go to the thing, people come up to me like it's revolutionary, and I'm like, no, that's what you should be doing. That is, you should be looking at players as individuals, because individuals make units make teams. So if you look at, sometimes people play certain systems, they might play a mid block or they fit the players to the system. They buy the players to try and play the system. When you're doing them as a youth team coach or a youth developer, you have to make players rounded so they can play for different people. You can't, if you want to win every game, you play a low block and have the big fast person up front and just play direct and win. And then everyone thinks you're a good coach, or you think you're a good coach. But you're not really. What you're doing is you're winning games with a team that it doesn't actually matter. Tell me when was the last youth team that got paid paid for winning the Youth Cup. You know.
If I bring you back to Howard Wilkinson, do you still keep in contact with him? I'm sure I've seen him on a documentary recently with the English coaches, around English coaches with Sky Sports.
No, I mean, I know he's always there if I need to ring him. I know he's always there if I need to ring him. And Les Reed as well, he was there as well. So there's been a few people that I've hung around with or been involved with that are, been very important.
You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that your team was Arsenal. How does the one that loves Arsenal so much end up at Tottenham Hotspur?
For the best part of a decade. Well, I still love Tottenham. I can't say I don't love Tottenham. Tottenham helped me continue my career. They helped me meet some great people. The fans, great when I was the first team coach there. But in the end, we're all doing a job, aren't we? When it boils down to it, in the end, you got to love the people that are paying for the PlayStation. That's what it is. At the end of the day, when I was at Tottenham, I was fully committed. Whenever we played Arsenal, I would always want us to beat Arsenal. So and then when our youth teams played Arsenal, I always used to want us to beat them. And then after that, I'd go back to supporting Arsenal. But I still support Tottenham to a point. I still always look at their results and how they're getting on, and the club itself is an unbelievable club. What they've done there as regards the stadium and the training ground and everything like that. It's fantastic.
How was that in terms of you developing those players at Tottenham? Because again, I asked this question a couple of weeks back to a previous guest in terms of academy and youth players, and some around the football club might see them as assets, see them as financial gains in terms of the system and selling players on. But you mentioned around those soft skills and the humanistic element of trying to produce players and support players. And also, it can also relate back to your experience, like you said then, in terms of your opportunities to play football, Chris. How was that for you in terms of seeing that system based on trying to produce the best that you can, but also, seeing them as human beings as well?
I think you take a lot of your own experiences. I talked about Bristol. You take a lot of your own experiences and what you do, instead of saying, well, it done me no harm, start saying, well, I didn't really like it, to be honest. What didn't I like? And what might have made it better? And I think sometimes not being a marquee player helps you to see things clearer. Because I think when you've got, like we talked about, when you have everything, you sometimes don't see what's going on around, and realizing about working on my game and stuff like that. When was I most successful in my career? Probably at the beginning and at the end. At the beginning because I was desperate, and at the end because I was desperate. In the middle, I had a 3-year contract. I wanted to be one of the boys. I had injuries. I had things going on, and things were. I had a level of security that meant that there was no desperation in what I was doing. So looking at the players and the backgrounds that they come from, and the people around, and Tottenham as an environment, trying to look at that probably helped me more deal and connect with players than the actual coaching side of it, and I think that's really important. And I think being a school teacher helps because you're meeting those people every day. You look at someone, you go teach in Hackney. You could teach in Hackney. Hackney is a place that's been regentrified. So for argument's sake, you're going to have the had-nots and the haves all going to the same school. So where the regentrification has happened is going to be people that work in Docklands and places like that. And and the other side of the road, you're going to have a block of flats where it's not so savoury to go in. And there's there's both got struggles, but one struggles, wearing silk pajamas, and one struggles, coming in late, with not much food and not much luxuries to help their children.
Following Spurs QPR, how would you summarise your time at Queen's Park Rangers?
I think my time was, I had a great time at QPR. Listen, whatever you do, as soon as you step into the seat as the manager, you've got knockers straight off the bat, haven't you? Some people are going to say, well, what's he done? Why has he got that job? Who's he picking? Your life becomes public straight off the bat. It's public enough when you're not the manager. So far less when you become a manager, you're going to be, don't forget, if you're the manager in the Premier League, you're only one of 20 people in the country. And you think how the game's like a religion here. So, the spotlight's bang on you. I've got to admit, I wouldn't want to do it again. I'd want to do it from a professional point of view of coaching and being a manager. But it's not that enjoyable. For me, it wasn't that enjoyable. The experience was great, but and it's not that it wasn't enjoyable from the point of view of doing the job, is the inverted commas fame part of it. I'm not saying I'm not a massive famous person like Harry Redknapp or Sam Allardyce or anything like that. But what I'm trying to say is the fact that the spotlight's on you all the time. That's not me. I don't like that from a personal point of view.
How would that impact you personally, Chris? So what kind of things would happen around that element of fame and attention based on you now being a Premier League manager? What does that look like in respect of the position you're in?
Well, it just means that people see you all the time. You can't act yourself all the time, because nowadays you've got cameras. Everyone takes a picture all the time. You can't have an argument in Tesco's because that's going to be in the paper. You can't, do you know what I mean? You can't do things that people do. People don't realise. If you're a Premier League manager, and listen, mine was short lived. But if you're a Premier League manager, you're public property. So most of the time, I just like living a normal life. So I'd take my little niece to the pitches. Do you know what I mean? That's normality for me, or just go out with my mates for a drink. But you've always got that in your mind that there's always somebody waiting to trip you up. And I don't think that's very comfortable. And you know what it's like now. And you have to accept it. Once you step into that arena, you have to accept that the press people have got a job to do as well.
Was it Tony Fernandez, the owner, at that time?
Ruben Gannon Ingham as well. Yeah, they were the two. And Amit Baha.
And how was that for you in terms of leading up? So you're now responsible for the players, but obviously dealing with ownership and hierarchy, which might be different to your previous roles. From a leadership and management point of view, can you elaborate on how you cope with that as a manager?
Oh, I was quite lucky because I had Les Ferdinand, and he's been massive in my career. But even that, he's above me, so you're still managing that with him, and it's quite difficult to know where to gauge it. In the old days where the ownership of clubs was very much culturally British, sometimes you know where you're going with that. When you're dealing with people from very, very different cultures from around the world, you sort of, I wouldn't say you're guessing, but you're having to figure out how to manage that area, that element first. And also you have to also look at how do you manage people who are supremely wealthy, who most of the stuff that they can do to gain success is based on the finance that they put in place for it to happen. And football isn't that type of game. You can have the most expensive team and still not win the league. Whereas in normal business, normal everyday business, you can almost predict. I buy 100 of these and sell it for £110, and then I know that £100 will be X. There's a target set and also timelines. Whereas in football, timelines are always very short.
I remember prior to you coming in, Harry Redknapp spoke a lot emotionally around that in terms of how he dealt with certain mavericks within the team and wages and superstars that were coming in, as you kind of mentioned. Did that challenge the dynamics on how to get the best team together to try and stay in the league and push on? Was that something that was just very complex at that time?
It very, very complex. And sometimes when you have a snowball going the wrong way, it's very hard to push it back up the hill, you know. And some of the times when you look at it and you think to yourself, what am I doing here? You have to believe in yourself, and you also have to believe in what you can control and what you can't control. You know, and sometimes the momentum goes against you, and no matter what you do, you know, like we always talk about, you know, someone has a shot, you have a shot, it hits the post on the outside and misses, and they have a shot that hits it on the inside and goes in. You know, or it seems like that happens, and you know, in the end, the lead doesn't lie really over the course of the season.
What are your thoughts on QPR today?
Yeah, good. I think they're trying to work in a way that's going to help produce assets. But so did we when we were there. I think change happens at any stage of the game. So you know, they've got a good manager, and you know, they've employed two good people in John D'Souza and Kevin Betsy to help develop the players that are there. So, you know, ultimately it's one of those, you know, you can only work to the resources that you've got. And, you know, it's great that they're having a more comfortable season than they have in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, last year they did well to get out of the relegation zone last year. Obviously, me being a Birmingham fan, I know that because we went down, but they had a bit of momentum towards the end, didn't they? And they kind of pushed away, which was good to see from a good community club there in London.
Yeah, like a boutique club. Listen, I can't thank them enough, QPR, for the platform that they gave me. Yeah.
Follow up a few questions, Chris. I want to ask you around black coaches. So I spoke to Darren Moore around this, and he mentions that he's proud of himself in terms of that representation, but still limitations and still potential challenges. What are your thoughts on that as a whole?
Yeah, well, I mean, years ago, Ricky Hill, who was another massive in my career, he alerted everybody to the Rooney Rule. Now, the Rooney Rule, obviously, in the guise of the American system, is one thing, and so it can't be done exactly like that. But it was just something that helped to alert people. For me, I think there's still a problem. I think there's still a problem as regards how people see black coaches. I still think that it's still going to be difficult, because I think at the moment there's a selective morality situation where people want to say they want to do the right things, and they want to put things in place. Yet you still can't control who employs who. And I think the numbers are there to be seen. However, I do believe that the authorities have put some stuff into place, i.e. mentees going into clubs and stuff like that. But I think it's a reflection on some societal things, you know, football. And in society, there's problems for minorities getting jobs in significant areas and significant roles. So I think it does reflect society to a point. But I definitely believe that the tide of change has been taken too long.
It's interesting you mentioned society. There is a lot more negativity. I think you mentioned the element of minorities at the moment within society. It'd be interesting how that actually does impact this process of trying to be more inclusive and diverse within the game of football.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happens is that, you know, I've said it in a lot of my things that I've spoken about before. There's a lot of PC language. And the PC language means that people get away with patting people on the head and moving on to the next. You know, I said something that was quite controversial a little while ago. I got some people agreed and some people didn't. But, you know, if you look at, say, someone like Ron Atkinson, who made a horrendous statement when he was talking about a player, and he rightly got what he deserved as regards how he got sanctioned and what happened. He rightly got that. I do not condone what he said. However, his actions are far from his actions in his career are far from the statement he made. So when you think about it, he had the 3 degrees. You probably won't remember your Birmingham sport. They were first three West Brom. He had at one stage when he was at Aston Villa 7 or 8 players playing in the team at one time. So I look at it like this, right? I don't have to go out for a drink with him. I don't have to be his friend. All I do know that is if I'm good enough, I'm going to play, regardless. Whereas you have a lot of people that say the right things, and people would look at them and think that they're miles away from what Ron Atkinson said because of what they say and how they act. However, their actions are nowhere near as good as his actions. Nowhere near it. So would I? And I'm still not going out for a drink with them. So what would I rather know? I'd rather know the person who doesn't like me, but prepared to give me an opportunity, than the person who appears to like me, but is not giving me an opportunity, and and hiding behind the languages and the laws and rules that have come out to justify how they're acting. So, like I said, a lot of people malign me for that because of that. I want to reiterate that I'm not condoning what he said. I'm just saying that you don't have to be friends with people that don't like you. What you need to do is just know that they're going to still give you the opportunity regardless of your ethnicity or colour.
It's a complex situation, real complex. And again, you know, I've spoke to Tajan Hutton down at Kick It Out, Troy Townsend as well, who's very much a pioneer with that. Obviously, you mentioned Darren Moore as well. But hopefully, you know, we see some positivity come out of that more sooner rather than later. Final question then, Chris. What's the future hold for you? So we've reflected on your past. What is it that you want to maybe accomplish now in the next few years for yourself?
Listen, I've put myself in a position where I've very qualified in a lot of things. I mean, I could be a fitness coach if a job came up. Any job that came up that was worth my while, I would have a look at it. At the moment, I'm freelancing. I'm traveling about. I've traveled a lot last year to America, Colombia, Spain, places like that to work. So I don't know. I actually don't know. There's 2 issues for me. One, there's not a lot of jobs out there anyway, so it's hard to get a job anyway. So let's put that one out there. 2, is not a lot of black coaches out there, so that's probably massive. And 3, I'm probably overqualified for most of the jobs that are out there. So, you know, and this is not me saying it. Some people have said to me, "You're probably too good for your own good," not meaning that I'm good, but you're too able for your own good. So when you apply for a job, how many people are going to want you around? Not many. Now, roundedness, so to speak. So I've been fortunate. Listen, I've never been a great big stature in the game. I've never been a big stature in the game. I've just been a journeyman coach and coach educator that wants to work. So for me, at the moment, you know, I'm probably heading out of the game at the moment. So, but I'm not going to sit around and just, you know, right. So football, you know, if I have to shut the chapter on football, then I'll have to, you know, shut that chapter and become a lecturer. Do you know what I mean? Or something like that. Do you know what I mean? But if that's the case, then that's the case. But I won't stop trying to get back into the game. I won't stop trying to. I'm sure that there's a role for me somewhere, but if not, football's just part of life, isn't it? It's just part of life. You have to move on to the next.
Chris, I just want to say thank you for speaking today. I just want to also thank John McPhail, who's also helped support this in terms of us connecting. Prior to our conversation, we had a little bit of difficulties getting on the call, but everything got resolved and sorted at the end. But I just want to wish you well, Chris. I think you speak really elegantly, and the stories that we mentioned from your early upbringing and how that's impacted, the football landscape and where you are today is very open and very interesting, and will support others on that trajectory as well. So I just want to say thank you for your time, and more importantly, good luck in the future.
No, listen, it's been an honour to be asked to come on, and I'm glad to be one of the 100 people that you've interviewed.